Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Chapter 6. A further account of the Academy. The author proposes some improvements which are honorably received. In the school of political projectors I was but ill entertained, the professors appearing in my judgment wholly out of their senses, which is a scene that never fails to make me melancholy. These unhappy people were proposing schemes to persuading monarchs to choose favorites upon their score of wisdom, capacity, and virtue, of teaching ministers to consult the public good, of rewarding merit, a great ability, and eminent services, of instructing princes to know their true interest by placing on it on the same foundation with that of their people, of choosing for employment persons qualified to exercise them, with many other wild impossibilities that never entered before into the heart of man to conceive, and confirmed in me the old observation, that there is nothing so extravagant and irrational which some philosopher had not maintained for truth. But, however, I shall so far do justice to this part of the Academy as to acknowledge that all of them was not so visionary. There is the most ingenious doctor, who seemed to be perfectly versed in the whole nature, the system of government. This illustrious person had very usefully employed his studies into finding out effectual remedies for all diseases and corruptions, to which the several kinds of public administration are subject by the vices or infirmities of those who govern, as well as by the licentiousness of those who are to obey. For instance, whereas all writers and reasoners have agreed that there's a strict universal resemblance between the natural and political body, can there be anything more evident than the health of both must be preserved, and a disease cured by the same prescription? It is allowed that the senates and great councils are often troubled with redundant, ebullient, and other peccant humours, with many diseases of the head, and more of the heart, with strong convulsions, with grievous contractions of the nerves and sinews of both hands, but especially the right, with spleens, flatus, vertigoes, and deliriums, with scrofulous tumours, full of fetid, purulent matter, with sour, frothy recutations, with canine appetites and crudeness of digestion. Besides many others needless to mention, this doctor therefore proposed that upon meeting of a senate, certain physicians should attend at the 3 first days of their sitting, and at the close of each day debate, feeling the pulse of every senator, after which having maturely considered and consulted upon nature of several maladies, and the methods of cure, they should on the 4th day return to the senate house, attended by their apothecaries stored with proper medicine, and before the members of the Senate administer to each of them lenitives and abrasatives, corrosives, ring-strengthens, palliatives, laxatives, salagatives, extirpatives, apogmalatics, and acoustics, as their several cases required, that these medicines should operate, repeat, alter, or omit at the next meeting. This project could not be of any great experience to the public, and it would be, in my poor opinion, be much of use to dispatch of business into the countries where Senate and any share in the legislative power beget humanity, shorten debates, open a few mouths which are now closed, and close many more which are now open, curb the pelliculi of the young, and correct the positiveness of the old, roost the stupid, and damp the pert. Again, because it is a general complaint that the favourites of the princes are troubled with short and weak memories. Having the same doctor propose, that is, that whoever attended a first minister, after having told his business with the utmost brevity, and in the plainest words, should, at his departure, give the said minister a tweak by the nose, or a kick in the belly, or the treads on his corns, or lug him thrice by both ears, or a pin into his breech, or pin his arm black and blue, to prevent forgetfulness, and at every levee day repeat the same operation till business were done, or absolutely refused. He likewise directed that every senator in the great council of a nation, after he had delivered his opinion and argued in the defense of it, should be obliged to give his vote, directly contrary, because, if that were done, the results would infallibly terminate in the good of the public. When parties in a state are violent, he offered a wonderful contrivance to reconcile them. The method is this: you take 100 leaders of each party, you dispose them into a couple of such whose heads are nearest of size, then let two nice operators saw off the occiput of each couple at the same time, such in a manner that the brain may be equally divided. Let the occiput thus off the interchanged, applying to each of the heads to his opposite partyman. This indeed This seemed indeed to be a work that required some exactness, but the professor assured us that if it were dexterously performed, the cure would be infallible. For he argued thus, that two half-brains being left to debate the matter between themselves within the space of one skull, would soon come to a good understanding, and produce that moderation as well as regularity of thinking, so much to be wished for in the heads of those who imagined they came into a world only to watch and govern its motion, as the difference of brains in quantity or quality. Among those who are directors in a faction, the doctor assured us from his own knowledge that it was a perfect trifle. I heard a very warm debate between two professors, and about the most commodious and effectual ways and the means of raising money without grieving the subject. The first affirmed in the justest method would be to lay a certain tax upon vices and folly, the sum fixed upon every man, to be rated after the fairest manner by a jury of his neighbours. The second was of an opinion directly contrary, to tax those qualities of body and mind for which men chiefly valued themselves, the rate to be more or less degrees of excelling, the decision whereof should be left entirely to their own breast. The highest tax was upon men who were the greatest favourites of the other sex, and assessments according to the number and natures of the favour have been received, which they are allowed to their own vouchers, wit, valour, and politeness, were likewise proposed to be largely taxed, and collected in the same manner, by every person giving his own word of quantum of what he possessed. But as to honour, justice, wisdom, and learning, they should not be taxed at all, because they are qualifications of so singular a kind, that no man will either allow them in his neighbour to value them himself. The women were proposed to be taxed according to their beauty and skill in dressing, wherein they had the same privilege with the men, to be determined by their own judgment. But constancy, chastity, good sense, and good nature were not rated, because they would not bear the charge of collecting. To keep senators in the interest of the crown, it was proposed that the members should raffle for employment, every man first taking an oath and giving security that he would vote for the court, whether he won or no, after the losers had in their turn the liberty or raffling upon the next vacancy. Thus, hope and expectation would be kept alive. None would complain of the broken promise, but impute their disappointments wholly to fortune, whose shoulders are broader, stronger than those in a ministry. Another professor shewed me a large paper of instructions for discovering plots and conspiracies against the government. He advised a great statesman to examine into the diet of all suspected persons, their time of eating, upon which side they lay in bed, and which hand they wiped from their posteriors; to take the strict view of their excrement, from their colour and odour, the taste, the consistence, the crudeness or maturity of digestion, formed a judgment of their thoughts and designs. Because men are never so serious, thoughtful, and intent as which they are at stool, which he founded by a frequent experiment, for in such conjunctures where he used merely as a trial to consider which was the best way of murdering the king, his order would have been a tincture of green, but quite different. He thought only of raising an insurrection or burning the whole metropolis. The whole discourse was written with great acuteness, containing many observations both curious and useful for politicians, but I conceive as not altogether complete. This I ventured to tell the author, and offered if he pleased to supply him with some additions. He received my proposition with more compliance than is usual among writers, especially those of the projecting species, professing he would be glad to receive further information. I told him that in the kingdom of Trivinia, by the natives called Langadin, where I sojourned some time in my travels, the bulk of the people consist in a manner wholly of discoverers, witnesses, informers, accusers, prosecutors, evidence, swearers, together with their several subservients and subaltern instruments, and under the colours and conduct of the ministers of state, their deputies. The plots in that kingdom are usually the workmanship of those persons who desire to raise their own character of profound politicians, to restore any new vigour to crazy administration, or to stifle or divert general discontent, to fill their pockets with forfeitures, and raise or sink the opinion of public credit. As neither shall be best to answer their private advantage, it is first agreed and settled among them what suspected persons shall be accused of a plot. Then effectual care is taken to secure all their letters and papers, and to put the criminals in chains. These papers are delivered to a set of artists very dexterous in finding out the mysterious meanings of words, syllables, and letters. For instance, they can discover a close stool to signify the Privy Council, a flock of geese, a senate, a lame dog, an invader, and a cock's head, the plague, a standing army, a buzzard, a prime minister, the goot, a high priest, a gibbet, a secretary of state, a chamber pot, a committee of grandees, a sieve, a court lady, a broom, a revolution, a mousetrap, an employment, a bottomless pit, the treasury, a sink, the court, a cap and bells, a favourite, a broken reed, a court of justice, an empty tun, a general, a running sore, the administration. Where this method fails, they have two others more effectual, and which learned among them called acrostics and anagrams. First, they can decipher all initial letters into political meanings. Such N shall signify a plot, B a resignment of a horse, L a fleet at sea, or secondly by transporting the letters of the alphabet into any suspected paper, they can discover the deepest designs of the discontented party. So, for example, if I should say in a letter to a friend, our brother Tom has just got the piles. A skillful decipherer would discover that it has the same letters which compose that sentence might be analyzed into the following words: resist, a plot is brought home, the tor. In this anagrammatic method, the professor made me great acknowledgments to communicating these observations, and promised to make honourable mentions of me in his treatise. I saw nothing in this country that could invite me to a longer continuance, and began to think of returning home to England.